Thank you for joining us. This recording was captured live at the 2026 NRB conference. While there may be a few moments where the audio isn't perfect, we're excited to share these great insights and discussions with you.
All right, folks, we're back here at the NRB conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and just really excited about my next guest. I want to share with you, and it's Josh Philipp, who is the senior investigative reporter with the Epoch Times. And boy, are you guys making a difference. What an amazing conservative news source you're turning out to be.
Thank you. It's been quite the journey. I've been with Epoch Times since 2006, and so I've watched it come up. I remember when our office was about 3 times the size of this booth, going to where we're at now. It's been incredible.
Yeah. Now you do have a print circulation, but
we're the 4th largest newspaper in the United States.
Oh my God!
Yeah, right?
That's
Isn't
amazing.
That crazy? Yeah.
What is it? New York Times, Washington Post.
I don't know. The third one is
Chicago,
Wall Street Journal, I think, and then us. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And Josh, you have 2 shows actually that you do personally. You want to tell us what those are?
Yeah. So I do Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. People probably seen that, especially during COVID. I was doing a lot of reporting at that time. I just started a new show called The Josh Philipp Show, and that's more like in-depth reporting, on-the-ground reporting, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then I do a lot of documentaries, of course, too.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go to the documentary part first, because you do have a documentary now that's out about Charlie Kirk.
Oh, yeah.
The impact that Charlie had is just still sending, waves of repercussions throughout America and the world. Last year he was going to be the keynote speaker at our conference.
Was he?
He was killed the day before.
Jeez.
He was supposed to speak at our place, and wow, that was something. But you've looked at his murder, if you will, from the angle of what led up to it. And
yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit in this film that you've made?
Well, I knew Charlie. I was actually supposed to speak with him at an event in South Korea right before he got killed. He did that, and then on his way back did an event in Japan. Those were his last 2 events. When Charlie died, I remember watching this, and I was thinking, wow, that could have been me, frankly, and that could have been a lot of people I know. When it comes to the circle of, being real, people would call me a conservative influencer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a small circle. We all kind of know each other, and it felt very real. Almost all of us have been threatened in some way or another. Almost all of us have felt that maybe our family is under threat if we go too public, and a lot of us understand that that's kind of the way things work. That there's pressure on you if you want to speak out. There's pressure on you if you want to be honest. If you're an independent journalist, or if you're saying things that go against the grain, you're going to have people who want to kill you.
Yeah.
And so Charlie was very brave. A lot of us understand this, right? And what I wanted to do in this documentary was 2 things. One, I wanted to preserve Charlie Kirk's legacy, and I'll explain that. But I also wanted to show the hit piece machine, how there's a system in place that identifies people as targets, lies about them, destroys their reputations, doxes them, gets their information out there, and then labels them as sources for attack. They'll send guys to your house, like Antifa types, to threaten your family. And the way this works is a type of what the Trump administration is now calling a conspiracy against rights. They're trying to make you too afraid to speak out.
Yes, sir.
They're trying to make it so I'm sure a lot of you have felt it. Would you bring your family to a protest if you want to go protest? Probably not, because you're worried Antifa is going to show up and attack you.
Yeah, that's true.
And so people know there are consequences if you want to actually act on your values.
Yeah.
But what does that represent? It means there's systems in place. They're trying to make it so you're too afraid to speak out, too afraid to assemble. So they're denying you your First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
They're denying you your First Amendment rights.
Well, they say, no, we're not. We're not the government.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? They say, well, that. But what Trump is actually doing with some of the criminal charges, they're actually going against these people on conspiracy against rights.
Right.
Like Don Lemon, for example, going to this church and being accused of harassing people. They were denying people their First Amendment right right of religion. And one of the charges some of the people are facing is that it's conspiracy against rights, because they are actively denying the constitutional rights of other people.
Well, that's a fascinating thing. I'm going to look into that. So what did you discover about this machine in your investigation?
So whenever I do investigations, I trace things back to the origin, and then I walk it forward. So my first inquiry was, when did they first start framing Charlie Kirk? The answer is right after 2007 in Charlottesville. So this was the story, okay?
Wow, that's a long time.
It was a long time. Charlie was young. I didn't realize how young he was, actually. You know, because he looked like an older guy.
He was only 30 when he was killed,
I thought he was older than me, but
he carried himself with a lot of maturity.
he did. But he was young. But you know, so when he was first coming out in the public sphere, he was much younger, early 20s, I believe. So 2007, what happened, right? So Donald Trump comes into office. The media is trying to label him as, you know, all these terrible things. They don't really have the grounds to do it. They're trying to say MAGA's an extremist movement. That's the whole narrative. They're saying that conservative values are a type of extremism, and Trump represents all of it. Yeah. They needed something to set their narrative. And so what was it? Charlottesville was the answer. Yeah. So the media, first of all, lied about what was actually said by Trump after Charlottesville. They said that Trump said there were very fine people on both sides, right? Which was not true. Yeah. Let me explain Charlottesville for those who don't remember, right? Yeah. It was there was a group that was going to tear down a Confederate statue. Yeah. There was a group that was going to protest the tearing down of the Confederate statue. Then Antifa showed up to attack the people who were there to protest against it. And then you had a far-right group, an actual one with tiki torches, show up to fight them. And it was violent. It was terrible. You had people with baseball bats and, you know, the whole 9 yards. At the end of it, one guy took his car and ran through a crowd and killed a woman. Mm-hmm. It was horrible. Yeah. And so afterwards, Trump was asked, you know, will you condemn this? And Trump was saying, you know, it was terrible. They had baseball bats. It was violent. It was vicious. I don't support this at all. Trump said there were very fine people on both sides, referring to the moderate people. Yeah. And then if you watch the full quote he had, because a lot of media cut it there, yes. The full quote said, but there were also very bad people. Yeah. There were also terrible people. And he was asked, do you condemn them? And he said, yes, I condemn them absolutely. So Trump actually condemned the far left and the far right.
But America, by and large, only heard there's good people on both sides. And then they spin it and say, Trump says that neo-Nazis are good people.
That was the story. Yeah. So all the big corporate media, they took half of that quote, plastered it everywhere, did not publish the full quote so no one could ever hear it. You can go watch it still, actually. The full quote is available. And only recently have they since acknowledged, okay, that they misquoted him. They quoted him wrong. But that quote was used to frame Trump as a Nazi, that Trump supports Nazis. And then it became that Trump supporters are Nazis. And so what they did was, using that narrative, they went to Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was starting Turning Point at that time, and they said, Charlie Kirk, you have Nazis in your midst. They're referring to Trump supporters. That's what the reference was. They're referring to Trump supporters. Do you condemn them? Do you disavow the MAGA movement? Because they were saying the MAGA movement is Nazis. And Charlie Kirk says, no, I do not disavow them. I do not, you know, these are Trump supporters, they're not Nazis.
So now Charlie's a Nazi.
So that was the narrative. They said, well, first of all, Charlie Kirk now has Nazis in his midst, and he's not doing anything about it. And then later on it became that he was a Nazi, and he was all these things, and they framed him as that. And the media narrative just kind of compounded on that. It went from being a mislabeling of his conservative base, being Trump supporters, as being Nazis in his midst. Other reports came out framing it that way. Media Matters, a lot of these different organizations framed him that way. ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, going after him. You had groups framing him as like this extremist. They, you know, all these dishonest ways they take things out of context and then label them with it. Right. And then what happens? Then they start getting people who are willing to act on these things, right? Antifa types, different far-left radical organizations, many of which are actually funded by pretty large groups. You know, there's a lot of funding behind them. So these are not just regular people just coming out and protesting. Threatening him, threatening his family, going to events and protesting. The media then makes him the bad guy. You know, the media makes him, you know, basically baby Hitler. You know, if you want to talk about it, you know, because if Trump is big Hitler, Charlie Kirk was baby Hitler, because he was the guy who was probably going to become president on the conservative side. That's what a lot of people thought, and I think he could have. And so what do you do to baby Hitler? What do you do to baby Hitler?
Yeah, you got to destroy him.
You destroy him. Yeah. And I think that's what happened. You had people who were so convinced by this false reporting that, you know, maybe not everyone was wanting to kill him, but you look at the aftermath and people were cheering for it.
Yeah,
people were saying, who's next?
Yeah, well, even today, you know, college campuses, they walk by a turning point table or something like that, and they will give the whole, you know, symbol of shooting in the net, this kind of thing. It's shocking.
Well, they've been radicalized to it, if not violence, to the point of celebrating death and violence.
Well, there was a poll done recently, and I can't quote exactly, I don't recall, but I believe that it showed that a majority, Josh, this blows my mind, a majority of college students in America believe that violence is a valid form of expression, is valid political speech.
Well,
that words are violence.
And the crazy thing is,
the words are violence, which is crazy too.
I was about to say that same group would be the ones who would say that conservative speech is violence.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Which is crazy.
Words are violence. So how?
But murder is okay.
Well, if words are violent, then doesn't that allow you to respond and defend yourself?
Yeah.
You see, so it's okay for me to kill someone who's using violent words.
That's a good point.
And all of a sudden that's legitimized, and it's absolutely amazing. You don't see, now there's people call themselves conservatives and all this, and not all of them are upstanding individuals and so forth and so on, but you don't see this tendency towards violence in politics on the conservative side, this doxing, harassment, threats, and all this kind of stuff. There's some, right? But do you think this traces back to a worldview issue? Like their view of the world is different than ours?
I've actually thought about this because it's true. Conservatives don't even really protest.
Yeah, we don't even like to protest.
I think if you want to ask me, and I know some Democrats aren't going to like hearing this, but I think it's because conservatives tend to be more religious, and so they're more like...
Well, there's no question, that's a fact. It's statistically true.
And I think because of that, you know, they believe in like turn the other cheek, they believe in being kind, they believe in, frankly, just being a bit more moral, traditionally moral people, and that's the basis of conservatism. You know, that's why that is what conservatism represents. Whereas liberalism, you know, it represents a looseness, right? I'm not condemning it. I think a healthy person needs a balance of strictness and leniency, and you know, I think you know you can't be too rigid. But
there's a lawlessness to the left.
Exactly.
Today.
You push it to an extreme, and there's no standards. And then it's even worse when I think the real problem is Marxism and communism. And if you were to ask me, communism, people say, well, what is it? It's sharing, it's redistribution of wealth. No, it's not. Marxism, if I were to really define it, is dialectical materialism, which is the ideology of struggle. So it's identify, contradict, and eliminate the middle. They want to drive a wedge between things, create contradictions, and then drive people in conflict. This ties into a Hegelian dialectical theory called conflict leads forward. They believe that struggle creates kind of a Darwinist effect where you can have social evolution, right? Survival of the fittest. You kind of turn the fire up, and you create conflict in society, and they believe the conflict is what drives the society forward, and they believe that that's part of the progress, the progressivism.
Well, for sure.
The progress towards their communist movement or their communist revolution.
Conservatives now have heard about Saul Alinsky and his writings, but he this is what he taught.
Rules for radicals. Donate dedicated to Satan.
Dedicated
or
to
Lucifer.
Satan. What a nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, but you go in and you get one group and you pit against another group, and then you come in and take advantage of that strife and conflict. And that is totally what we're seeing here. Did your investigation uncover any sources of funding or leadership behind this whole machine that you're talking about? Not quite. I mean, it was a nexus of organizations. Some are connected, some are not. I mean, it's groups like Media Matters and the ACLU and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But part of the same kind of political machine. And and I think that is the big question: is are they? Okay, fine. They all work in kind of the same way. Are they connected? I don't know. I'd say they're ideologically connected. Is there some grand conspiracy where they're intentionally doing this? I don't know. But at the very least, you could say that there is a system that they know they're part of, where when you put someone on a hate list, which they did, when you label someone as a Nazi, which they did, when you label someone like this, you know what effect it's going to have.
And I personally believe the intent of that effect is to make examples of them, saying, do not dare speak out, do not dare platform the Trump side, or we will destroy you.
Yeah.
We'll destroy your reputation. We'll make it so you can't live comfortably, and we'll destroy you. And that's what this does. It is being done for political effect, to make people too afraid to speak out about their beliefs or their religious views or their political views.
Well, one of the things too, just contrasting conservative to leftist, is the respect, the appreciation for freedom of speech, right?
Yes.
And freedom of religion. Do you see that the left really has abandoned freedom of speech? It used to be the ACLU was all about freedom of speech.
Yeah, it used to be college campus protests and stuff
yeah,
like that.
Of course it was. Yeah, you can put FU on the back of your jacket on a college campus and stuff like that. But now it's like, no, it's about controlling speech, isn't it?
It is. And I think we saw, so a couple examples of that right now. That's one of the big battles for the internet right now is, quote unquote, hate speech laws. That's why Trump is really contending right now with the United Kingdom when they're trying to extend their laws here. They're trying to, silence people on X. They're trying to censor Americans. Germany just put a fine on Gab, which is a social network, a little more extreme, honestly, but a social network. But Gab doesn't even have any presence in Germany. Wow. They're fining a company that has no legal presence in Germany. How can a country try to restrict the rights of another country, or the citizens of another country? That's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so
the EU is doing that in multiple ways. But
the European Union with the DSA, right, the Digital Services Act, is trying to do this. And so the Trump administration, they're actually regarding this as a human rights abuse. They're regarding that. They're even looking to open up channels to publish media in Europe, and that's forbidden there. And they're even, for example, offering, people in the UK now can seek refuge in the United States if they feel they're being attacked by their own government because they can't speak.
Well, I've heard that 12 to 13,000 people are imprisoned in the UK today because of what they said on social media.
Well, or even praying in your mind outside an abortion clinic can get you thrown in jail, as we saw.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, Josh, you've done a lot in your career already, and some of the other things you've covered, before we went on camera, you were telling me you had covered the situation in Venezuela.
Yes.
And looking into that, and there's a lot more to that than what people know. Can you share that with us?
I'll actually say this, and this is not being widely reported, but if you go back a few months, you can actually see the articles on it. Just the media kind of erased history on it. There was almost a war in Latin America. Basically what was happening is Venezuela was going to invade Guyana, and Brazil was going to work with them on it. Right before Trump started blowing up the drug boats, what was happening? So this is the story, okay? This is the real story of Venezuela. So Guyana is a country just north of Venezuela, northeast corner of South America, right? Right there, they found one of the largest oil reserves in the entire world just a few years back. Everybody wants it. These guys are like the new Saudis. There's a lot of money there and a lot of oil, and everybody wants it, especially Venezuela. But I'll get into that in a sec. So a lot of countries are doing oil exploration there. ExxonMobil, you have stations just offshore. They're doing the oil rigs, because a lot of it's offshore oil. Venezuela, Maduro claimed they have historical ownership over Guyana, and they're saying the oil
sounds a little like a guy named Adolf.
Yeah, right. It's the same narrative the CCP is using over Taiwan. Historical ownership. So they're saying that all the oil actually belongs to Venezuela. Remember, Venezuela is an oil country too. Their economy is oil and drugs. Way to build an economy, oil and drugs. But they want more oil, obviously. So they claim they have historical ownership of it. They challenged it in the world courts. The world courts came back and said, no, you do not have historical ownership. Maduro actually went to his own legal system and passed in their own law saying that they do. So he said, well, the international system says we don't own it, but Venezuelan law says we own it.
So he's laying a pretext for it.
And so they actually had moved their military to the border, preparing for invasion. They started doing live fire exercises, which is what you do before you invade these days. They moved their navy right alongside it. They were beginning to encircle the country. They were right. In fact, the Navy was right by the Exxon stations. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, actually went down and told them, you guys, Venezuela, you need to back off or there's going to be consequences. They said, watch me do it, basically.
Yeah.
Brazil was going to back him up with Lula in charge, and they were about to invade. Now, had they invaded, you would have had America probably intervene because, again, we had to protect our oil rights, and people want to say it's oil wars. Well, yeah, that is true. Okay, fair enough. But they're coming after our oil this time. We're not going to let them take it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we had to protect our oil stations. Not only that too, but it's America's trying to revive the Monroe Doctrine,
Yes.
and basically these countries undermining peace and stability in Latin America would be a violation of that.
Yeah.
The other big thing is it would have caused a mass humanitarian crisis. You would have had a lot of displaced people. So I was actually in Panama a couple of years back investigating the migrant crisis. I was at the Darien Gap. Found the United Nations running the whole show. It's actually.
Oh my goodness.
So Biden brought us into an agreement. It was an Obama era thing. Trump took us out. Biden brought us back in. It's called the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration.
In other words, no borders.
It was intentional.
Yeah.
So they were funding it and running it through the State Department. It was going to the UN. It was mainly being done through I can't remember. There was a couple branches of the UN doing it.
Wow.
A couple branches of the UN doing
so
it.
let me just pause for just a second.
The IOM, International Organization for Migration, that was the one doing it.
So the Biden administration funnels the money to the UN to run a migration program,
and the UN,
and then opens the American border, but tells the American people, well, our immigration system is broke. Right?
Yeah, well, no, it was. I don't know why they weren't being honest about it, because the whole thing was set up. I had another documentary expose this. Anybody wants to watch this, it's called Weapons of Mass Migration. I actually went to Mexico, Panama, and I went to all the places in the U.S. that are facilitating it. This is how this, I'll say this briefly, I'll go back to Venezuela. Basically, the State Department was working with the United Nations, running this program. It was an international agreement. Europe's part of it. Most of the world is part of it. Most Latin American countries are part of it. The same program running it here is the same one running it in Canada, the same one in Western Europe with all their boats and everything like that. Basically, they were giving the money to the UN to run it. It was an agreement. They agreed to do it.
Yeah.
Signed, sealed, delivered. Right? They give the money to NGOs, and the NGOs run the boats and the buses and the ships and all that kind of stuff. And that's the way it was working. So I went down to Panama, and I actually got access to all the camps. Some of them are Indian villages, like Embra Indian villages. They run them out of.
Yeah.
Some of them are Senafront, which is like the Panamanian military.
Okay.
Or police/military, but they didn't like the whole thing one bit. But basically, it was a bus system. They throw them on. They get them registered with the UN. They had check-in booths from the United Nations. A whole bunch of NGOs running the show. They have a bus system. They bus them one country to the next until they reach the U.S.-Mexico border. They cross the U.S.-Mexico border. They get taken in by National Guard or Border Patrol. They have to take them to what they call processing facilities. These are being run by Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
They check them in, they do biometrics, they give them temporary protection status and parole, which means they're eligible then for social welfare.
Yeah.
They hand them back to the end, they give them a free airplane ticket or a free bus ticket anywhere they want to go in the country. They then hand them off to the NGOs, and the NGOs did the resettlement, the free housing, free food, and the whole 9 yards. That's how the whole thing was being run. And it was part of, again, an international agreement that we had signed on to.
Wow.
This was not this was not like, oh no, we left the border open. It was right towards the end of the Obama administration. It was from a New York.
Yeah.
It was from an agreement that started in New York, but later went to the UN.
Well, the whole no borders philosophy is coming out of the World Economic Forum, and it's the idea
They're pushing for it.
they're pushing for it. It's all part of the globalist agenda, right?
It is, and part of it is what they call the multipolar world order. They want to make America just one seat at the table of global governance.
Yeah.
They want to have America's voice no bigger than Cuba or Canada or Mexico.
Yeah, that's amazing. Where can people? Is that investigation available? How do people find that?
They can watch that currently. That's on Epoch, epochtv.com,
Okay.
epochtv.com.
And what about the Charlie
that was
Kirk
called
one?
Weapons of Mass Migration. The
Weapons
Charlie
of
Kirk
Mass-
one's also on there too.
And what's it called?
That is called it's called Truth Under Fire: The Framing of Charlie Kirk.
Okay, and then So going back to this whole South America.
Yeah, Venezuela.
Venezuela. What's the?
So
there's an axis, isn't there, between China, Venezuela, and Cuba?
Yes.
Can you comment on that?
Well, so let me say briefly what almost happened. So they were going to invade Guyana. Marco Rubio sent a message, said, there's going to be consequences if you try this. They say, "Watch me, gringo," basically, which is what they do call us, by the way.
Yeah.
And then,
I feel like it's 100 years ago or something. But
no, the whole saying they had was to push out the gringos, which was the rejection of the Monroe Doctrine. That's how they refer to it. And so they were planning to do it. They were about to do it. And then right after Marco Rubio sent the message to them, that's when Trump started blowing up the drug boats. Okay. And what that was is America we moved our military there, right? It was a naval blockade. The naval blockade stopped the invasion, first of all. They were still going to move on it, and that's when Trump went and abducted Maduro. Trump stopped a war from taking place. You would have had a regional war in Latin America with with two of the biggest countries against a very small country, and we would have got pulled into it.
Yeah.
The nexus when it comes to Cuba and stuff like that, so Hugo Chavez was very close to Fidel Castro. And they were the ones who created all the intergovernmental organizations throughout Latin America to push out the United States and to bring in Russia, China, and Iran. Okay. Iran has a lot of influence in Latin America. Wow. They even have Hezbollah political parties in some countries, like Panama. Peru, for example. Yeah. They also work very closely with the drug cartels. So a lot of the narco-terrorist organizations are tied in with Iran also. Yeah.
Well, there was a documentary I saw that showed, it was talking about how the cartel in Venezuela, and I forget what it's called, the Solis or something like that.
Cartel of the Suns, yeah. Cartel of the Souls, yeah.
Is so massive it makes the Mexican drug cartels look like
it's because it's the military and it's the government.
Yeah, and they're all one and the same. Yeah. Right? I was speculating, this is on the record now, but I was speculating that perhaps Trump was trying to get at the root of election fraud. Wondering if there's some connection to that. Any thoughts about that? Because
that probably will be the story, because one of the big narratives on the illegitimacy of Maduro is that he stole the election. Yeah. Even the Biden administration did not recognize Maduro as the official winner of the election. Right. But if you're going to delegitimize his presidency, you have to prove that he rigged it. So what does that mean? It means investigating the election systems, and the same ones in Venezuela, some of the same technologies they use here. Yeah. So maybe. Maybe, yeah. There's more digging that needs to be done. We'll have to see if it comes out.
All of the dots there, but fascinating. And so, if one more link here in the story, as I understand it, if Maduro had been allowed to invade Guyana, then there would have been a regional war. The United States would have been pulled into it.
We would have had World War III.
Okay, how does it get to World War III?
So this was all of this: Russia, Iran, Gaza, Hamas, Ukraine, Venezuela. All of this was a pre-written Chinese Communist Party strategy that was public. This wasn't secret. Several years back, just prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, before the whole October 7th attack on Israel, before any of this was a public written strategy in China. So one of Xi Jinping's main advisors, Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP, right? Mm-hmm. A guy named Qin Canrong wrote a proposal, basically. And he said that if China is going to invade Taiwan and go to war with the United States, they were afraid they were going to lose, right? Because they can't fight America by themselves. They said the U.S. military is designed to fight and win 2 wars simultaneously. So if China is going to win, they have to get us involved in at least 4 wars. Wow. At least 4 wars. And what wars were there? They said they wanted a war with Russia, and now we have it. We have Russia, Ukraine. We're not fighting it directly. Zelensky wants us fighting it directly, but we're not fighting it directly. But we are draining our weapons reserves.
Yes.
We drained our ammunition. We've drained a lot of our munitions, yes. and we're not replenishing them. We don't even have wartime manufacturing to replace it, because we lack manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So we're getting drained on that front to the point where we don't even have enough ammunition right now to fight a war if we got pulled into one. Not a full-scale one at least, and that's why Trump's trying to revive, wartime production. Yeah, it's one of his big things right now. The next one they wanted was a terrorist war, and what happened? Well, now you have Iran, and Iran's the global puppeteer of global terrorism. Mm-hmm. You have Iran, but you also had Gaza and Hamas and Israel.
Yeah.
Now, what happened right before the October 7th attack? The leaders of the Palestinian Authority went to China and met with Xi Jinping.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
I think within a couple weeks, right before it happened.
Yeah.
The Taliban did the same thing before they took over Bagram Airport.
Wow.
Just a couple weeks before they did that, the Taliban leaders went to China and met with Xi Jinping.
Josh, in America today, do we have a real blind spot when it comes to China? Are we not being realistic about what we're up against?
The U.S. government is starting to understand that China is the main problem. China is the main threat. And all the new defense papers, everything is now recognizing that, because they're the hand behind Russia. They're the hand behind Iran. They're the hand behind the drug cartels and the drug trade, as we're now finding out.
Yeah.
They're the hand behind global terrorism. They're the hand behind training all these groups. They're the hand behind just about every major war and every minor war. They're the hand undermining us at every single juncture globally.
So here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1990s, Soviet communism falls. A couple years later, Berlin Wall comes down. And the press everywhere is saying, it's the end of the Cold War.
Yep.
Communism is dead. We've defeated communism. Meanwhile, we've got this massive country which we used to call Red China, that's still under communism. And but it's just China, right? Has the Cold War ever ended? Or maybe put it this way, are we in another one?
The Cold War never ended. Even the Russian communists didn't ever go away. The Soviet bloc communists, a lot of them went into the United Nations and the EU.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the same guys.
Yeah, same guys. Well, Putin himself, right?
Yeah, he was a KGB agent. Yeah. And so, or I believe he was Stasi actually.
Oh.
But or maybe a bit of both. But communist China, they right alongside Russia, they were also running a lot of the global communist revolutions. They were the ones training all the Maoist revolutionaries throughout Latin America and Africa. So communist China was one of the very active global players in the Cold War against the United States. When the Soviet Union collapsed, basically they said we're in danger, and what did they do? Well, they opened up economically, and they let us basically bail them out.
Yeah.
We bailed them out by giving them investment in our factories. The agenda of the Chinese Communist Party, from Mao Zedong through every single leader up to Xi Jinping, has been this: that there can be that they say the slogan is "We live, you die," which means China cannot coexist with the United States. The Chinese Communist Party cannot coexist with the United States. They believe if the CCP is going to survive, they need to destroy the United States. And the agenda to destroy America has never changed. Never changed.
Wow.
When Deng Xiaoping was asked about this, I did a documentary on this too. It's called The Final War. You can watch that too. I talk about all this stuff. When Deng Xiaoping was asked, why are we becoming a free market country? Does that not mean we're communist now? Does that mean the agenda has changed? What did he say? He said, black cat, brown cat, what's the difference as long as it can catch mice? Meaning, capitalism, communism, what's the difference as long as we can destroy the United States? So I think the understanding that China changed, or it's not communist anymore, comes from a very weak understanding of communism, viewed only through economics.
Yeah.
But they're still a communist country. They still have a communist party that dominates the whole country. If you're going to be a leader of the CCP or a leader of the country, you have to do their study sessions, you have to study Xi Jinping thought. Their main program is to export socialism with Chinese characteristics. They have an entire system of Xi Jinping thought. They're exporting through technology, through entertainment, through video games, everything. All the global programs are run through it. All the companies are, state-affiliated, if not state-owned enterprises, or at least controlled through massive bureaucracies. Basically, we've been propping up an enemy that has been saying very publicly they want to destroy us, and everything they do, in effect, is for that purpose. Every puppet string they pull is for that purpose, trying to undermine the United States. They've always regarded us as their enemy. They say we're their enemy. They announce it publicly. It's in their media. Every official's talking about it, and here we are, thinking, well, you know what, we trade with them, so they must be our friend, and that's never been the case.
Yeah.
They even export the persecution here. Chinese dissidents face ongoing death threats.
Yeah.
There are people, for example, like democracy groups here who get death threats. Shenyang Performing Arts, New York-based performing arts company, they're anti-CCP. They get bomb threats, death threats, tires of the cars slashed all the time. Constant pressure from the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP is so brazen, they're undermining the rights of American citizens in order to stop speech against them.
Wow. I'm sure you could go talk about that for hours. But here's my question is, why aren't we calling a spade here? Why publicly doesn't the president come out or other leadership and start talking about these things and what China's real agenda is and just get the facts to the American people? Because it seems like that it's sort of in the background and we hear it, and maybe we hear it a little bit more and more, but still we're not recognizing that China is at the root of so many of the problems we're facing today in our country. And it would help a lot, it seems to me, if the people of our country started to hear about that.
Yeah, well, even publicly, for example, NATO has determined that China is the main enabler, the key enabler of Russia's war with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They're the key force preventing the peace deal between Israel and Gaza. Because they're actually saying, Israel's stance is there can be no future Gaza with Hamas present. China made a coalition of these groups and said and embedded Hamas in it, and said there can be no future Gaza without Hamas. They're the ones, again, who are pulling the strings of the drug trade with the Mexican cartels. They do the precursors, they do the money laundering for them. I mean, again, with Venezuela, that was the big thing too. Yeah. They're everywhere. Yeah. If you want to ask my take on why America doesn't say this more publicly, the unfortunate truth is money. Yeah. We're too economically tied in with them, and money interest is stopping us from saying it publicly.
Because there's too many, the political donors have vested interests.
Unfortunately,
in making money off China. Wow,
it's changing a bit where you do see Trump trying to decouple the stuff, and part of it is for national security. We can't be totally reliant on them for rare earth minerals. We can't be reliant on them for factories. If they lock down their economy again, like they did under COVID, they'll destroy the global economy again, which they did previously. They're trying to decouple, but they're not willing to be strong enough still because of financial interest.
Well, and we could talk also about so many other things. Specifically, is China the monster financially that we're afraid of, or do they have a lot of weaknesses? Any China expert, anyone, or a dissident expert, I should say, if you're talking to one who plays ball with the CCP, they'll tell you otherwise. The Chinese economy is a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. It's a mafia state. Let me give you some examples. The Chinese businesses, even publicly traded, every business on the stock market can be audited, not the Chinese ones. You're not allowed to audit them. Right? Every time they audit them, they find it's a Ponzi scheme. Every single company they audit has proven and shown to be a Ponzi scheme. Every Chinese tech company is involved in some type of surveillance. TP-Link with the routers, they're getting sued right now in Texas because of this. There's a baby monitoring company that is being accused of having CCP ties like this. They've been scooping up our data and spying on us. So what happens if we put Democrats back in control of Congress, and God forbid if a Democrat should win in 2028, what's going to happen with China?
The China issue is one of the few, I'd say, bipartisan issues. It's not. I think Republicans are probably a little stronger, but Democrats are pretty strong on China too. Even during the Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken was pretty strong on China, but they're not as aggressive. Mm-hmm. I think the reality is we need to recognize we're actually at war with them.
Yes.
It's an unconventional war. So China's fighting what they call unrestricted warfare. It's about 72 domains: non-military, trans-military, and unconventional military. Drug warfare, biological warfare, economic warfare, cultural warfare, media warfare, legal warfare. I mean, I could go on for hours. That's the war with China. It's not bombs and guns and tanks. It's subversion. Mm-hmm. And in order to recognize this, we need to actually be very strong against them and understand we are in an unconventional war, and if we don't start fighting back, they're going to destroy us because that is their stated agenda.
Yeah. So we are in a Cold War.
Yes.
And it's really not that cold, just like with Russia. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on Truth and Liberty. This has been one of the most enlightening interviews I think I've ever had. So
appreciate it.
I really do appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.